the slogan in CPI that we've used, we say that we need a government of action that will fight for working families. Right? Because we've been told, well, the government is best, the government's least. The government should just sit back. And I tell people, if you're a parent and you're just sitting back and your child isn't being fed properly, or your child's not getting, proper clothing to keep warm in the winter or whatnot, that's called neglect. And I would say that our government is guilty of criminal neglect. Too much of this country has been forgotten about, has been left behind. And so what we need is a government of action. That'll pave the roads, that'll hire the unemployed, that'll start rebuilding the country. We have a 4-point economic plan to improve the United States. Step 1 is a mass program of construction. Hire the unemployed, put them to work doing useful work, building, constructing, etc. Step 2 is public control of our natural resources. America's oil, America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas. The wealth from that should go into the public budget.
What about electricity?
The electricity that comes from our rivers or from put energy and put natural resources into public ownership. And then the third stage would be public control of our banking system. So that, and I tell people, maybe Marx is a little too radical for you, read the Bible, read the Quran, read the Torah, right? They all forbid the lending of money at interest because everybody knows that if you have a group of people who make money by having money, they just lend money and get money back, pretty soon they're going to be way richer than everybody else, and pretty soon the government's going to be indebted to them, and pretty soon they're going to have all the power. And the Federal Reserve System is just a ripoff. I mean, we get poorer. Every time we print a dollar, we get like $2 in debt. This doesn't make any sense. So get rid of the Federal Reserve, create a national bank, create a state bank, create some local banks that lend credit strategically for how we can make our country more prosperous, right? If we think we need more businesses in a certain area, lend money to make it happen. We need more people owning homes, we lend money to make it happen. But lending credit strategically, putting control of the purse strings of credit into the hands of the country overall, right? That'll enable us to control our economy. And then our fourth step would be the enactment of an economic bill of rights, which is what our President Roosevelt called for in his final State of the Union address: the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education. And I tell people we shouldn't view these things as a handout, right? We've been told that if, giving people health care, giving people a job, that's just like giving them a handout. No, we should view it as an investment in the nation, right? Because if we're going to have a strong economy, we need everyone to be contributing to it. We need everyone to be employed and working and contributing. If we're going to have a strong country, we're going to need a healthy country where the people are at their best health so they can be as productive as possible. If we're going to have a strong country, we need an educated country. We don't want our people to be stupid. We need engineers. We need scientists. We need smart people who can make an informed decision when they go to vote. So an economic bill of rights is really an investment in our country, because if we're going to have a strong country, we need to have a strong population, because it's the people that make a country. Right? And so an economic bill of rights, that's our 4-point plan. National program to rebuild, public control of natural resources, public control of banking, economic bill of rights. And we think those 4 steps, the USA might not, fully be socialist if those things were implemented. One could imagine some kind of welfare state or some kind of populistic government that it wasn't fully socialist that did those 4 things. But in order to enact those 4 things, you'd have to defeat the power of all the big banks. You'd have to defeat the power of all the big oil companies and energy monopolies. You have to mobilize the population. Socialism wouldn't be too far off. And we call those 4 things that we would like to enact, we call that a government of action. And it would be a state or a government that would operate in a different way. And it kind of reminds me what I saw in Venezuela. The reason that Hugo Chavez was so popular was because right after he got elected, there was a mudslide. There was mudslides in the country. And he sent the military to go help the people that were affected by these mudslides. And that had never been done before in Venezuela's history. The military had generally only been sent in to put down uprisings, etc. And so when these mudslides happened and all these people were displaced, he sent the military in, and there was a wave of patriotism. People said, wow, we've never seen the military and the government move this way. And he created citizens' power councils, Bolivarian circles, and that's how Venezuela got on the road to socialism, was through, this kind of showing people what a popular government could do. And, I think about what Roosevelt did when he was president, right, with the Works Progress Administration, building the the Civilian Conservation Corps, building post offices, building highways, building airports. If you had a government that was mobilizing people and calling them to get involved in the political process, you could actually do a lot of things. But right now, we don't have leaders that view things that way. I think, however, we're entering a long-term crisis, and our elite are fighting among each other right now. And historically, that is what opens the door to popular movements, because as the elite fight among each other, they need mass movements of people to have their back, and that creates the opening, right? And the reason Roosevelt was able to do all that he did was because he aligned himself with the labor movement. He said workers had the right to occupy their factory and demand union recognition, and he aligned himself with the mass popular movements because he was at odds with the rest of his class. The business plot and various fascist elements wanted to remove Roosevelt, and he saw himself under attack, so he fomented a mass movement to protect himself. And I mean, I don't suspect that Donald Trump would do such a thing, but if he was smart, he would. Right? If Donald Trump, he sees that the majority of the government and the capitalist class is against him, they're trying to imprison him for running for office, trying to keep him out of office. If Donald Trump was popular, he would align himself with a mass movement of people, fighting for economic justice. I thought it was great when Jimmy Dore said that on the Tucker Carlson show. He said, and that really in order to change society, you need a mass movement. And often mass movements begin because of divisions within the ruling class. And we're entering a period where there are big divisions in our ruling class, and so that creates openings for the people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, but didn't also Roosevelt say that the New Deal actually saved capitalism? Didn't he say something like that?
Yeah, and that was his intent. He was not a communist, right? But he also wanted to maintain friendship with the Soviet Union. And who knows what could have happened. I mean, he died just as World War II was ending, and he was replaced with Truman, and then the Cold War began. Truman dropped those atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the world changed. And Henry Wallace, who had been the vice president under Roosevelt, he ran for president in 1948, and he was very much a socialist in a lot of ways. So it's complicated. But ultimately, Roosevelt was from the wealthy capitalist class, but he was at odds with the rest of his class, and he fomented a mass movement for his own reasons, but that opened the door to all kinds of different things happening. So I think we need to study these things and look at how can we change society, because I meet a lot of younger people that are interested in socialism and communism, but a lot of them have lost the understanding that we can change the world. A lot of them think that it's kind of a way to express their alienation, but we need to look at the history of mass movements. The labor movement, the peace movement of the 1960s. There have been the civil rights movement, the Black liberation movement. There have been movements that have changed the course of American history, and we should study those movements and learn from them.
Yeah, like for instance, Eugene Victor Debs and what was going on over 100 years ago. When there were actual socialist parties that actually had some influence, and that's and a communist party working with the CIO. That's how the New Deal really happened. It wasn't Democrats and Republicans. I tell that to a lot of my friends. It wasn't Democrats and Republicans that technically initiated that idea at all. It was the movements of what was going on, and I tell people about Henry Wallace. How he was a socialist and he was a pacifist. So that's why the powers that be didn't want him to be the president, because they had plans for those bombs. You know what I mean? And so people need to understand. This is why it's important to understand the history. You know what I mean? So that you can at least have a different perspective than what you were taught or weren't taught in school.